for archives and records management. Our research projects have resulted in best practice policy and policy documents for electronic records, disaster preparedness, access, and open government, leadership, and diversity. Biennial statistical surveys of state archives and other surveys provide comparative data on state archives budgets, staff, electronic records, preservation and management, digital preservation capabilities, and this year, the impact of COVID-19. Our online research center or resource center provides templates, reports, and best practices created by individual state archives as well as CoSA. We also have worked towards collaboration with our external stakeholders. In the past few years, this has been centered around our Access grant that I already mentioned, with our partners, the National Governors Association, NGA, National Association of State Chief Information Officers, NASSIO, National Association of Secretaries of State, NASS, and Chief Officers of State Library Agencies, or COSLA, to create guidance documents. And you'll hear more about this later in our presentation. Many of these research projects have been made possible through support from sponsors listed at the end of this presentation. CoSA is also dedicated to providing dynamic and flexible education and training solutions that meet the needs of our members and stakeholders through our annual meetings, webinars, our CoSA On Demand, which facilitates discussions about member-requested topics, right now dominated by COVID-19, our listservs, newsletters, scholarships, and of course, personal contact with our collaborative partners. Advocacy is also an important piece of what we do. CoSA strives to be strong, consistent, and well-recognized representative of members' needs among policymakers, funders, and allied organizations, and the media. We act as a clearinghouse for reliable and timely information, participating in policy and funding discussions, developing and distributing advocacy and awareness messages, and working in partnership with counterparts and allied organizations, such as professional archival organizations like the Society of American Archivists, National Association of Government Archives and Records Administrators, NAGARA, the Regional Archival Associations Consortium, or RAC. We work with them individually and via the Joint Working Group on Issues and Awareness. We also work with federal agencies like National Archives and Records Administration, National Historic Publications and Records Commission, Library of Congress, and NEH, our National Endowment for the Humanities. And also allied professional organizations such as NASSIO, as mentioned above, NASS, NGA, and COSLA, and of course the National Coalition for History. And finally, CoSA is dedicated to sustainability and excellence, meeting the changing needs of state and territorial archives and their staff by leading as an effective, forward-thinking, and financially viable organization with diverse and sustained funding sources, strong awards programs, and encouraging engaged and creative and diverse leadership within our committee, staff, and executive board. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, I'm sorry. You can go back to the earlier slide. I'm going to pass this off now to Tom, who's going to be talking about COVID. Tom.
Thank you very much, Jody, and welcome to all of you. It's so wonderful to have the opportunity to share information and talk with our partners. Partnership's really important, and I would say that this COVID-19 crisis underscores the value of partnership and the benefits of working with all of you. I'm going to talk just for a couple of minutes about what we're doing at the state archives levels in terms of responding to the crisis and the change in the way we do our work, and also supporting the broader efforts across the country and with each other. I want to start by talking a little bit about some of the critical things that we're doing within our repositories. The first, of course, is maintaining essential services, delivering information to government agencies and local governments, and as well as sometimes non-government historical records repositories to enable them to continue to do their critical business. Many states hold records that are actively used by agencies and as part of their routine business, and some of the business of government doesn't stop. So we're actively supporting the work of our colleagues in other agencies across all of the states to ensure that they can continue to do their business operations. One of the things that we've done over the past several years, and with many of you as our partners, is develop a very large and robust collection of digital resources. One of the things that we're making sure that we do and seeing the great benefit of is ensuring that those digital collections and those digital resources are available and the servers that deliver that information are fully operational. To some extent, that's a monitoring activity, but one of the things that we're all seeing is a high interest and great benefit of having resources available digitally and in a self-service mode for folks who are working from home or continuing to do the kind of work that they do and no longer can come and visit the repository to obtain the information they need. The pause that many states are facing, where we no longer have the opportunity to provide on-site service, gives us the opportunity to improve and expand the content of our finding aids and online information so that when this crisis is over, or even during the crisis, researchers can come to expect and receive additional, much more robust information about our collections. I know many repositories are increasing their transcription activities or increasing the number of box and container lists that are available to researchers. At the end of this, we'll have much more robust and much more improved online information systems. And then finally, we're working with teachers and other educators to take the primary source materials that we have or that we help administer and ensuring that those resources are available to teachers and educators who are now also doing remote learning and distance learning. So to take full advantage of the resources that we've been building, again, with many of you over the course of the past several years, to deliver great primary source materials that are tailor-made for this kind of a situation where students and teachers need to operate and work remotely. One thing that's not on our slide that is essential that all of us are doing is monitoring the repositories, the conditions of the repositories that hold these records. It's essential for us to continue to ensure that the materials in our care are in safe, secure, and environmentally managed facilities. And we're all doing that to ensure that when things come back to the new normal, the repositories and the collections within them have managed to get through without any issues. We can go to the next slide. A couple of the things that we're doing that are pretty important is looking forward to the opportunity to gather documentation of the response to the pandemic. Many of us in the State Archives business have received a lot of inquiries, especially as this pandemic began to unfold, about the great Spanish flu influenza in 1918 and 1919. Having an abundance of information materials to share with future policymakers, future historians, and anyone who wants to understand how we did this and got through this pandemic is an essential function of what archives do. So we're all strategizing both with each other and within our own states to come up with approaches to ensure that we gather a good, robust, and useful documentary record for future research. One of the things that we have to do as we start to bring staff back or have some of our staff working in those essential functions is ensuring that they have adequate safety while they're here. Social distancing, providing adequate PPE, and organizing the work so that both staff and anyone that they interact with are sufficiently protected from infection. A critical problem that many of us face as any organization with a large degree of remote and at-home workers are, particularly in this challenging time, is ensuring the mental health of both of our staff. We're all working with various strategies to come up with approaches to ensuring that staff have opportunity to interact with one another, have access to mental health services, and ensuring that staff understand the work that they do is really important, that they're valued, and that they have someone they can talk to and interact with as they've spent now close to their second month stuck at home. Finally, we're looking at what the new normal will be. We need to start to plan for a lot more remote work, greater demand and use of our online services, and in the government sector, a likelihood of a reduced resource base. The world will be very different when this is all over. We need to plan and prepare and ensure that we have the capacity to adapt to that new normal. The next slide. One of the things that we did very early on as this pandemic started to unfold across the country is we went through the resources that we have stockpiled in some cases in our repositories to help us address disasters. Much of us have PPE equipment to deal with mold or other situations that might arise should there be a natural disaster like a flood or hurricane, etc. A number of state archives donated significant quantities of PPE to their state or regional response efforts. It was a great opportunity and a great feeling for all of us to contribute to the broader solution and the protection of many people, most of whom we will never meet. That's my little report. I'm going to pass it along to Barbara.
Thanks, Tom. We appreciate that overview of what's going on with the state archives under the COVID-19 pandemic. And we also appreciate many of you being here with us today when you're taking time from probably emergencies that you're dealing with your own association or repository. So we appreciate you being here. As many of you know who are friends with CoSA for the long term, we've been emphasizing electronic records for about 9 years within the state archives community with the State Electronic Records Initiative. In SERI, CoSA works with our members, our federal funders, and corporate sponsors to improve electronic records management and digital preservation in the 50 states, 5 territories, and DC. Next slide, please, Becky. And on this chart, you can see why we're worried about electronic records. You know, when I first started working in archives in the mid-'80s, there was always a question about, oh, we're going to have the paperless office, everything's going to be electronic. And that really did not turn out to be the case. It turned out to be there are more records that are paper records and more electronic records. But the growth in electronic records has really been exponential, as you can see from this slide. In 2006, there were 76.5 terabytes of electronic records in state and territorial archives in DC. And in our last survey in 2018, there were 1,700, well, really almost 1,800 terabytes of electronic records that state archives were dealing with, which is such a huge growth. So you can see why it's such an issue for us within state archives. Next slide, please. It was a growth of actually 2,250% over that 12-year period. So that shows the urgent need that we have in state government to deal with electronic records. And then the challenge is compounded because a few state and territorial archives don't have a mechanism to manage digital electronic records. Sadly, archives and records management is not always a priority in state government, with collectively state budgets allocate less than 0.002% to archives and records management. And we expect, you know, with the pandemic that's only going to get worse as all of our budgets within state government are going to be affected by the crisis. Next slide, please. Thank you. And you may wonder what we've been doing to address these challenges. When we first started working on electronic records as a priority in 2011, we contacted several of our funders. We started with the National Historical Publications and Records Commission, the granting of the National Archives, to help develop resources for state archivists to use. And we also did an initial digital preservation assessment, because one of our priorities was to share technology and best practices. And then a second priority was to train state archive staff to manage the changing landscape of records creation and preservation. And for that, we turned to our partner, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, for a Laura Bush 21st Century Librarian Grant Program to educate and train state archive staff around the country, and also to do a second digital preservation assessment where we could see the growth of the what we had done from the first assessment had we had any impact. And the training that we created at that point is actually still being used today. We're using, I'm sorry, would you go to the next slide, please? Sorry. Another thing we did with our IMLS Laura Bush grant was to take a look at what we had done for the past 6 years. Had we had an impact? Had we made any difference in what we were doing? But we found at the end of that 6 years that state records were still in danger, but that we had improved it slightly, incrementally, and that the changes that we had worked on with training state archivists and providing education through the IMLS grant and also providing a resource center with the NHPRC grant had helped with our state archive staff learning more how to deal with the challenges they had in front of them. And could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. This sort of shows the assessment that we did in 2011 and 2017 and the difference that we had made. And it's not a great, we'd be happy to see if all state archives had electronic records program that addressed everything that needed to be addressed from when the record was created to when it came to the state archives to be taken care of. But in 2011, we really only had 5 of our 56 member institutions who did not have who had that capability, who could say, yes, I'm addressing all stages of the life cycle. And then we saw that we had made a difference for where there's a growth probably in each of these categories, so that by the 2017, we really only had 5 of our members who hadn't begun doing any kind of work with electronic records yet. So we do know that our work and our federal funding and the collaborative nature of our projects and the help from our sponsors helped us reach what we had achieved in those 6 years, and we just have more to go. If you'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, and this is for Michelle Gallinger. She is our SERI coordinator, and we'll talk to you about our current grant and our current research projects that we're working on. Michelle.
Thank you, Barbara. The current project that is the main focus of the CoSA SERI work right now is the Access Grant. IMLS, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, funded a planning grant for Access in 2014 and the implementation of that planning in 2018, and we are currently still working on that implementation aspect. The focus is really to guide the creation, the preservation, and the use of electronic records, looking very closely on how to expand influence through collaborating and cooperating with strategic stakeholders, other professional associations, other content creators who have an interest in preservation, but maybe not the same level of detailed knowledge that the archives community has. Becky, could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. We have formed and strengthened strategic partnerships. Jody, thank you so much for identifying so many of them at the top of this presentation. NASSIO, NASS, NGA, COSLA, and are exploring additional partnerships with others. In these partnerships, we have been co-producing, co-branding guidance materials, both for the CoSA membership and for the membership of the other professional associations, to increase awareness of digital preservation actions and the importance of state electronic records. Next slide, please. We have done a nice amount of products as a result of this grant, and those products can be found on the URL at the bottom of this slide, and they are grouped according to who the intended audience is. So, of course, there are plenty of opportunities for overlap and plenty of opportunities to use information intended from one audience for another. Next slide, please. One of the most widely read pieces that we have produced as a result of this IMLS-funded access grant is the State Archiving in the Digital Era Playbook. We did this in collaboration with NASS. It was published in 2018, and it has been downloaded over 1,600 times. So we know that this is being read. We know this is being seen. Anecdotal evidence was that we even had one state CIO hand it to their state archivist and say, "Have you seen this?" They of course had seen it and had commented on it while it was in production. But it was just such a wonderful anecdote because it told us that this document was having reach and was having impact. Next slide, please. We have also done a number of pieces with the National Association of Secretaries of State, including this one that is imaged here, which is about constitutional officers transitioning out of office and the steps that they need to take to preserve their state electronic records. We've also done a piece with National Association of Secretaries of State on piecing out the complicated differences between public records, open records, and restricted records. While records that are state electronic records may all need to go to the archives, they may need to be treated differently based on which category they fall under. And that piece was an educational piece about the differences in record types. Next slide, please. We've also done 2 infographics in cooperation with both COSLA and NASS. These are intended to be pieces that increase the digital literacy of the reader. We are all finding ourselves awash in information, and it is important for us to be able to identify what information should we trust and what information should we view skeptically. So this first infographic was about information and misinformation and how to identify what pieces one should trust online. We've also just in this last month put out a second piece, next slide please, which is about how to identify altered images, when to trust your eyes, and when to look at an image skeptically. As we all know, there's more digital images out now than ever before, and it's easier to edit them than ever before. And being able to have a couple of techniques in one's back pocket makes negotiating what's accurate and what's altered a little easier. So it's been wonderful to work on digital literacy issues with COSLA and NASS. Next slide, please. We've also had productive collaboration with the National Governors Association, including this piece, which is pictured about first steps in managing records when a governor and a governor's staff are transitioning into office. What are the first steps they can take to properly manage their state electronic records? We've also done with them 2 yearly webinars to talk with them and their constituents about records issues. It's been very well received. Email has been the preferred topic there, but they have a lot of interest in risk management of state electronic records. So it's nice to see that relationship is deepening and that there are opportunities for continued involvement with the National Governors Association. Next slide, please. And to our professional associations, we have also worked during the Access Grant with a corporate sponsor, Preservica, to produce this report toward a common understanding. This was a lengthy enterprise in which we surveyed the state archivists and then took a new version of the survey out to both state archivists, state agencies, and state CIOs to identify where problems were in getting state electronic government records to centrally managed systems. Specifically, we focused on some of the transfer challenges and learned quite a bit about about that, which I will share with you next. Next slide, please. Thank you. As you can see from this graph that we drew, that we pulled from toward a common understanding, the transfer of records of permanent state electronic records from agencies to the state archives are largely planned and manually transferred by the agency staff. They're not, as a rule, planned and automated. So there's a real opportunity for us to take either automate or reduce the personnel time involved in transferring of records. And to that end, one of the products of the report was a transfer checklist that archives could use with agencies or CIOs to develop their own guidelines and standards for state electronic records transfer projects. Next slide, please. In addition to the Access Grant, the SERI has a number of subcommittees, and the subcommittees are working on regular efforts for the State Electronic Records Initiative. One you may have heard of is Electronic Records Day, 10/10. That is an annual attempt to raise awareness about state electronic records issues and challenges. There's a poster every year. We do a number of tweets, and it's a nice opportunity to raise awareness about the challenges that surround state electronic records. The SERI Educational Subcommittee has a series of webinars. The next is scheduled for the end of May, which will be on BitCurator. And these are opportunities for archives staff to learn more about the kinds of tools, workflows, guidelines, and other products that are out there, digital records management. So it's a to keep staff engaged professionally about what's happening in the field. And then something that of the SERI subcommittees in cooperation is a best videos went up on YouTube, and it's frequently asked questions about bit rot and how it can be something that you need to be aware of and protect against in your own archive. There will be additional videos coming forward that will be elevator pitches, how to talk to electronic records, how to write a grant, what basic again, going back to what basic protocols are required for transfer, and a number of other topics will be coming forth over the next year as well.
Hi, this is Jody.
Barbara, is it
dropped out? Hi, I'm back. As mentioned earlier, thank you very much. That was a great report. There's so much work that you folks are doing and so many great tools, Michelle, that you're putting out, in addition to all the work that the SERI committee and subcommittees have done and continue to do. So thank you very much. As mentioned earlier, a guiding goal of CoSA is providing education. Much of that effort is coordinated by the Education Committee, ably co-chaired by Kathy Popovich, the Archival Program Administrator at Illinois State Archives, Sean Rounds, the State Archivist and Director of Library and Archives at the Minnesota Historical Society. As this slide shows you, their efforts have been very successful. Our member webinar series, 600 plus attendees in 2019, whose theme, interestingly enough, was disaster planning and emergency preparedness. Little did we know it was coming in 2020 for us to be putting some of that stuff into practice. This year is Hot Topics, which includes some Advocacy Tips from Every Library, which is an advocacy organization for libraries and library collections, but who has extended their reach out into archives, and we're very happy to be working with them into the future on advocacy efforts for archives. Another topic is the Online Archive of California and the great work that they've been doing in providing access to digital materials. And promoting cultural diversity through cultural competency, sort of dovetailing with some of the work that SERI's been doing in terms of political competency and understanding of your resources. A full list will be on our website for all the webinars coming up this year. We also do the CoSA and NARA quarterly webinar series. This is coordinated by Meg Phillips of NARA, the External Affairs Liaison, and all of the talented members of NARA. Their staff focuses on, the webinars focus, on joint significance, areas of joint significance with state archives, things like open government, FOIA requests, using social media for outreach, and some great material that was coming together for the suffrage exhibits. And I'm sure that we'll work more closely into the future with the 250th anniversary that many of you are also looking forward to. Future topics will include collections processing, using more product, less process. So it's very specific to archivists, but important topics on how we get through as much material in our backlogs as we possibly can, so we can push that material out to all of you and all of our users. We also work on and provide a monthly CoSA news brief, which reaches about 1,000 subscribers. That just talks about our members, talks about some of the work that they've been doing, action alerts, meeting information, and project updates. Our listserv and social media, 2,500 plus followers and subscribers, much of the same kinds of information, but just in a different format, trying to reach out, extend our reach to as many folks as we possibly can. Next slide, please. Another major focus of our work is coordinated largely through our advocacy committee, which again is ably co-chaired by John Dugan, Missouri State Archivist, and Jim Corridon, retired Indiana State Archivist. Working heavily, of course, on federal budget pieces, support for NHPRC, for NARA, IMLS, NEH, looking at budgets, which we're all concerned about, and the authorization. Also working to collaborate with many groups on advocacy efforts in general, including SAA, NAGARA, and RAC, and the Joint Working Group on Issues and Awareness. Pardon me, issue briefs and position statements. These include a lot of different topics, but transparency was the last one relating to COVID records, response and documentation. Looking at, of course, NHPRC reauthorization as well, or NARA reauthorization, and NHPRC's budget. Also looking at advocacy for individual state archives, most recently related to support for filling long vacant state archivist positions, and working with any state archives that has an issue that they believe that we can help them with in terms of overall advocacy. Next slide, please. And research. As already mentioned, research is a major focus of CoSA's work, and in the year to come, we're going to be looking at a follow-up to the Toward a Common Understanding, which Michelle described earlier, which provides guidance and outlines best practices for transferring digital records to state archives. CoSA's current research project, we have a follow-up to the research and disseminate the best practices on interagency transfer of permanent records. The project was sponsored and supported by Preservica with additional assistance from AVP, which we're very happy for, and thank you very much. I appreciate that very much. And coming up will be our 2020 and 21 State of State Records, Archives and Records Management Survey. This is a biennial survey on state archives and records management programs. For data on 2018, you can see the State of the State Archives report, again sponsored by Preservica and published in 2019. This is a report that's compiled by COSA staff and COSA consultant Veronica Marcel. Has some great information on, just gives you a snapshot really of what state archives are doing, how they're doing in terms of budget and people, and addressing issues related to electronic records. And obviously there'll be some information culled in that also about our response and some of the challenges that we're going to face as a result of COVID-19, which everyone on the call is probably nodding their head. Yes, there will be repercussions for all of this that go beyond the medical. That is all that I had. I think we can go on to Q&A.
Becky, if you go back one more slide, there's one other thing we wanted to mention to everyone who is here today. As you know, when we meet together in D.C., we usually have time for everyone to tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, what you did last year, what your goals are, what are some of the things that you're working on. So we thought we'd like to try to bridge that a little bit and not really do it today, but if you'd like to send us a couple of paragraphs about what you're working on now, what your goals are for 2020, your 2019 highlights, and how the current pandemic has affected you and your members, we could share that back out to everyone who's attending today. And we could also, if you're interested, feature some of you in our newsletter monthly. So you just let us know. And Lisa Johnston, who's our administrative coordinator, will send you a little bit more information about this if you've registered today. And then you can get back with her if you'd like to share information with us. So we'd appreciate that. It's not quite as interactive as being together at the National Archives and having cookies, but we'd appreciate it if you'd let us know what you're doing, and we could share it back out to everyone who's here to get a little bit of communication started. Now I think we're ready for Q&A. Thank you.
Well, Barbara, one of the things, questions
Go ahead, Lisa.
I did notice an interesting post. I did notice an interesting post from Mike Quinn from Preservica, and so Becky's going to unmute his mic for a minute. And so, Mike, if you would go ahead and reshare what you had in there about what Preservica is doing.
Yeah, hi Lisa, and thank you so much for inviting us to attend this. And first of all, let me say that Preservica is honoured to be working with COSA and all the state archives at this time. One of the things we've been very conscious of is the enormous situation with the COVID-19 at the moment, the pandemic, and it's affecting everyone. And so at our user group, which was a couple of weeks ago, we launched an initiative together with Preservica users called Our COVID-19 Story. And a number of organizations have stepped forward saying that they're seeing a huge influx of digital content associated with emergency response, for example, policies and so on and so forth. And so we're working with a number of city and state archives at the moment on this. So, for example, the folks at Rhode Island State Archive, I know, are doing some great work in capturing emergency response information. The folks at Alaska State Archives are doing the same as well. But it's also happening at a city level. So I'm here in Boston, and Marta Crilly, the archivist at Boston City Archives, is capturing literally daily information on COVID response. And that's everything from the websites, bulletins, to social media things, and other bulletins that are going out. So Preservica's support for this is that we've given free storage to Preservica users so that you can capture all this COVID-19 information. And we're supporting our community as well by allowing to do more online. So we're providing more online support and training and videos so that folks can be productive from home while achieving this. So all the examples I've given you are folks working from home doing this remotely right now. And it's important that we help you, the State Archives, your institutions and your communities to capture this information as it's unfolding right now. So as I say, we're honoured to be working with CoSA on this at this important time. Thanks, Lisa.
And Mike, this is Barbara. If you send that to us, then we can send it out
Mike,
to the other partners who are here today because they may be interested in joining in too. Yes,
yeah. If you go to our website, there's an initiative, but we can certainly get a posting out to you, Barbara, on this, and we can send you. It's a free to join initiative, and if you're Preservica, many CoSA members are already Preservica users. If you're not aware of this, there's nothing you need to do. We will just donate the free storage to you, and you can just use this free storage specifically for COVID-19 response information. So we're delighted to be supporting and honoured to be supporting CoSA and the State Archives at this time, and our communities at this time.
Thank you. And does anyone have any questions for CoSA about any of our programming that we've talked about, or anything that you'd like to hear more from us about? If you just type it into chat and let us know, we could follow up with you or answer your question today. I know if you're like the rest of us, we're sort of just trying to keep going, and it's hard to actually process what is going on with all of our groups and our members at this time. But if you have any questions that you think of later, you could also let us know. But if you have any questions for us today, please let us know in chat.
This is Jody. While we're waiting on questions, I'd kind of like to hear from folks who are listening in today. If you'd like to share how your organizations are either preserving or promoting the preservation of COVID-related materials, I'd just like to hear about some of the things that are happening in that respect. You can let us know in chat if you want to be unmuted, or you might be able to unmute yourself, I'm not sure.
The hardest time, of course, about you, but called upon to type something in chat. That's immediately when my fingers find all the wrong keys, and so that means I have to type backspace and type over it and then of course I can't type quickly, and all you hear is people waiting for it to sit there, and it makes it more difficult. We were pleased today with the number of organizations who've registered, and of course, most of you are here representing your different organizations, and so we really do appreciate all of that. And then the number of state archives and territorial archives who also work with joining in to share in the information and to be part of that. Okay, Mike puts one more comment in chat. He said there's also a LinkedIn group to share digitally preserving COVID-19 responses, so that's wonderful. NEH, Joshua Sternfield. Becky, can you unmute him?
Hello, I hear a beep.
Joshua, are you unmuted yet?
I think so. Can you guys hear me
there
okay?
You are.
Hey.
Yes, we've got you now.
Well, I believe I'm here with Joel Worrell, and he and I have been chatting back and forth, and so we just wanted to make sure that all of you are aware of the brand new announcement that we've made for the new funding opportunity that we're calling the NEH Cares program. This was just announced on Monday, and it is part of the stimulus package that was released by Congress, and I believe all of the State Archives partners are eligible to apply. I will just read a very brief summary here, if I can find it, but I would encourage you to go to our website, NEH.gov, and you will certainly find all that you need about the program. It is a very quick turnaround. The turnaround is May 11th to submit applications for up to $300,000. And these, the program activities is fairly wide-ranging and is in direct response to everything that your organizations are going through with the COVID response. So I encourage you to read through the Notice of Funding Opportunity. And if you have questions, you can certainly reach out to us at preservation@nih.gov. We are not able, as you can imagine, to read drafts, but we will do our very best to bend over backwards and answer any questions that you have about the program. There's a lot of sort of particularities that are built into the program to be able to address the current circumstances. So again, the deadline for submission is May 11th. Programming will start as soon as mid-June and will run, the period of performance is scheduled to run through December. And again, our main priority for this funding is to help with hiring needs, with sustaining staff, and any other kinds of staffing or resource issues that have been impacted by COVID-19. So you are welcome maybe to ask a question or two. I don't think, but more probably the better bet is to email us at preservation@nih.gov. And we'd be happy to respond as quickly as we can. So thank you.
Thank you, Josh. That's really good to know.
Thank you, Josh.
We appreciate it. Sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
Quentin from Ancestry said he could talk briefly a little about what Ancestry's COVID-19 initiatives are. Becky, can we get Quentin Atkinson unmuted?
Thanks for giving us an opportunity to participate. I'll try and make this relevant to the folks on this call. As you know, many archives have reached out to us during this particular time asking what we could potentially do to help patrons and staff members with access to records, especially records from their archive that sit on the Ancestry website. One of the first reach outs was from the National Archives, which led to us opening up free access to all of the NARA records that we have from NARA on the Ancestry website. So that's currently in play right now, where anyone can go to the Ancestry website and get access to about 500 million records from NARA for free. Similarly, with state archives that we've worked with, where we have records on our website that are in a paid area, we do have a way for access to be provided to your state residents. And some of you already participate in that. If you aren't already doing that and would like to, please contact us at Ancestry, and we'd be happy to find a way to open up for this unusual time period, open up access to some of our records that come from your archives that sit on Ancestry, and we can do that for free. And then finally, we do have a curriculum for the K-12 programs. So for schools, we've created curriculums that help teachers, parents, and students to use records as a way to teach history, to teach other principles. So if you search for the Ancestry K-12 program, we are offering that free for everyone, both at home and within the school system, so that they can use records as a way to teach certain subjects. And again, much of that comes from records that sit in your archive that we've digitized and are made available on Ancestry. That's it.
Thank you, Quentin. We appreciate the information. I have Doug Robinson from NASSIO. If we could unmute Doug, he's going to share a little bit about what NASSIO has been doing for COVID-19. Hey, Doug, are you unmuted?
I am. Am I unmuted now? Very good.
You are.
Thank you, Becky. Thanks. And just a quick item from the state CIOs. Interestingly enough, in 2007, we produced and released a pandemic planning document. That was in response to SARS and H1N1, talking about the inability of state IT staff and support and data center folks to be able to actually actively work in a data center that may have been compromised or contaminated. It was really a prospectus. It was a thought piece, but we put it out there because we thought that states weren't thinking about that. So that was 2007, and lo and behold, we could repurpose that about a month or so ago. So we've actually now released our third version. So we released version 2 about 3 weeks ago. We've already done 2 updates, and we're about ready to release version 3. So that's, again, it's not an extensive document. We're not trying to overwhelm people, but it's a whole series of recommendations, and we're building on that as an iterative document, kind of an agile approach to be able to do that for our state CIO, state IT community. It covers a lot of items that we're learning along the way as we have our bi-weekly calls with all of our state members and state CIOs about things that they've encountered around scaling and remote work, around security, obviously just the culture of issues, but some practical and some technical issues that we have to address around things like VPN tunneling and use of private devices, and a lot of things that the states have learned as they scale, in some cases 10 to 15x where they were in terms of their remote workforce. States that have had to purchase 2,000-3,000 laptops and deploy those, and states where you had to actually, state workers had to go back to their office and pick up their desktop machine and their monitor and bring them home. So we had to deal with things like sanitizing and disinfecting devices. And so the reverse is going to be true as state CIOs try to bring back folks in the state IT community. So in addition to the guidance document, we put together a resource page right away back in February. And then we've continued to add to that, including, I think today we're going to drop our 5th podcast. So we've been interviewing CIOs kind of geographically dispersed around the country, starting with Jim Weaver in Washington, since Washington was the first state with a significant number of COVID-19 cases. So we started with Washington, and then we've interviewed a number of state CIOs about their COVID-19 experience and just kind of lessons learned and leadership lessons learned to date. So we're going to continue to produce those in response to that. So right now, I think significant discussion is what I will call the path forward. And so it's going to be extremely difficult for states, in at least the IT space, to determine how to bring employees back to work. We have states that have several thousand in central IT. And so how do you bring them back to facilities? How do you stage that? How do you bring devices back in? What needs to be done from a decontamination perspective? What needs to be done in terms of allowing those folks back in terms of screening? So I think those are some of the things that all states are going to have to deal with from a broad state government perspective. But the CIOs and state IT recognize that the IT complement may be some of the first people back in physical buildings. So I think all those things are being discussed today. So we have regular calls with all of our members, and the big part of that is discussing cybersecurity and risk management. There has been a dramatic increase in cybersecurity attacks and bad actor threats against states during this time, not surprisingly. So the chief security officers are doing double duty in addition to having to deal with securing remote access to services and then scaling dramatically. We've had UI, unemployment insurance systems that have had to take 2,500 to 3,000% increases in a couple of days. And so those are all of the situations that our state CIOs are dealing with. But anyway, if you have a chance, look at the guide and share it with folks that are interested in what they need to do on the IT side.
Doug, this is Barbara. Just thank you so much for you actually, all the state CIOs have been very helpful to the state archivists. And if you think about all the other agencies that you've been having to serve, I know the state CIOs have really had a lot to do. We appreciate all the work.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. I can tell you that none of them are working from home. So they're all in their,
right.
I spoke to 3 of them today, and they're all in their offices. So they are maybe one of the few people left in there, but they're kind of coordinating that from their CIO slot.
Thank you. Jody, I'll turn this back to you to close out.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today and adding to the conversation. I know that these are really challenging times. But I also know that with support from each other and all the great brain power that's out there as represented by all the folks who are on the call today, that we will address this and we will move forward. So again, thank you so much. And if there are ways that we can collaborate with you that we haven't done yet, please reach out to us. We are willing to help and work with any and all. So. Thank you, and please be safe and careful out there. Thank you so much.